Have you ever stopped to think that much of what we use today was invented thousands of years ago? It sounds unbelievable, but the Romans created such advanced solutions that they are still present in our daily lives. Now imagine a world without well-built roads, without sewage, without running water. Chaotic, right? But the Romans changed everything. In this video, you'll discover 7 stunning innovations in Roman engineering that are still a part of your life. Get ready, because number 5 is unbelievable. Once you've watched it, you'll never look at the world around you the same way again. Can you imagine driving along a road built more than 2,000 years ago, and that is still standing? For the Romans did just that. Not only did they create an efficient road system, but they laid the foundation for modern highways. Before them, traveling was a real torture. Mud, holes, and paths that disappeared with the rain. But then the Roman engineers came along and changed everything. Their first genius idea was the layered construction. No uneven terrain or simple dirt tracks. Roman roads had a solid base of large stones, followed by gravel, and at the top, a compacted surface. This ensured that they could not only bear the weight of goods and soldiers, but also withstand the wear and tear of time. And as if that wasn't enough, they created a drainage system that is still used today. The road surface was slightly sloped sideways, allowing water to run down into ditches on the sides. Without it, potholes would quickly form, making roads impassable. The Romans also had another cardinal rule. Whenever possible, roads should be straight. Instead of going around mountains, they cut them down. If a river appeared in the way, they built bridges. The goal was to make travel faster and more efficient, something that remains a fundamental principle of civil engineering to this day. The importance of these roads was so great that the empire came to have about 400,000 kilometers of roads, connecting cities, fortresses, and ports. The famous saying, "all roads lead to Rome," did not come about by chance. This transport network made it possible to move armies quickly, supply cities, and ensure efficient communication between different parts of the empire. The impact of this infrastructure is still visible today. Many modern highways were built over ancient Roman roads. In Italy, the Via Appia continues to be used. In the United Kingdom and France, many roads follow exactly the same routes established centuries ago. In addition, the idea of measuring distances at landmarks along roads was born with the Romans and turned into the signposted kilometers that we find on today's highways. Have you ever felt that the stories you know about Rome are always the same, without the real details, emotions, and strategies that defined the greatest empire in history? With that in mind, I created the 10 battles that shaped the empire. This book gets straight to the point. Clear, moving, and never-before-seen explanations of how legendary leaders turned battles into historic milestones. You no longer need to get lost in confusing reports. Click on the pinned comment and download now the 10 battles that shaped the Roman Empire. But beware, it is for a limited time. Transform the way you see history and discover what has always been missing in the narratives you thought you knew. Now imagine with me, without this network of roads, the Roman Empire would not have lasted so long. Trade would have been limited, armies would have taken much longer to respond to threats, and the administration of the empire would have been in chaos. And this model was so efficient that it shaped the way modern nations plan their highways. Another interesting point is the use of concrete by the Romans. This material, which seemed centuries ahead of its time, made it possible to build incredibly resistant bridges and roads. Many of these structures are still standing, proving the quality of their work. If you think today's highways are resilient, imagine something that has survived for 2,000 years. The Romans literally paved the way for the modern world. The organization of its roads directly influenced the development of cities, the expansion of trade, and the very way civilizations connect. Their road system was not just a technical breakthrough, but a revolution that echoes to this day, proving that some ideas are simply future. And to ensure even more efficiency, the Romans had resting points along the roads. These were small stops called mancios, where travelers and messengers could rest, feed their horses, and prepare for the next leg of the journey. Something similar to the stopping points on the current highways. In addition to the main roads, there were also the shortcuts known as viae vicinales, connecting smaller villages to the major routes. This helped in the movement of goods and kept the transport flow running smoothly. The Romans were so meticulous in planning their roads that some of them are still visible from space. The straight lines and organized patterns of these roads can be observed in satellite images, showing how far ahead of this civilization was in its time in engineering and urban planning. Before proceeding, I saw here that you haven't subscribed to the channel yet. You won't want to miss all the content about Rome that I will always be bringing. Have you ever imagined a concrete that gets stronger over time and even regenerates on its own? Well, the Romans created this more than 2,000 years ago. While today's buildings crack and need constant maintenance, constructions such as the Pantheon and the Colosseum remain firm and resistant. How did they achieve this feat? The secret was in the recipe. Unlike modern cement, Roman concrete was made with volcanic ash, lime, and pumice. This combination created a chemical reaction that caused the material to harden even more over the years. And the most incredible, when it cracked, the water entered the cracks and activated a self-repair process, forming new crystals and closing the cracks. In other words, time was not the enemy of this concrete, but an ally. Thanks to this formula, the Romans were able to build aqueducts, temples, and even harbors that withstood centuries of earthquakes, erosion, and bad weather. Even structures that have spent millennia submerged in the sea are still standing, while modern buildings crumble in a few decades. Not to mention their intelligence in applying this material. They poured the mixture directly onto the construction site, ensuring a perfect fit between the layers, without air bubbles or failures. The Romans didn't just use this concrete in buildings and monuments. It was also present on roads, bridges, and even in ports, where seawater, instead of wearing down the material, made it even stronger. This phenomenon occurs because the minerals in the composition of the concrete reacted with the salts in the water, creating a crystalline structure that further reinforced the construction. Modern science has long tried to unravel this formula to create more durable infrastructure. We already know that adding volcanic ash to current concrete can increase its strength, but we have not yet found a suitable replacement. Imagine if all our constructions used this method. Cities would have safer buildings, bridges that would last for centuries, and less costs with constant repairs. In addition, the Romans developed application techniques that ensured maximum efficiency of concrete. They poured the mixture continuously and compacted it carefully, preventing premature cracking. Today's builders still study these methods to improve the quality and longevity of modern works. Another interesting detail is that Roman concrete did not depend on steel for support, unlike the reinforced concrete we use today. This means that their buildings were less susceptible to corrosion caused by iron oxidation, one of the main problems of contemporary construction. But the influence of Roman concrete was not restricted to the past. Scientists are studying ways to bring this technology into modern times. With the growing concern with sustainability and durability of buildings, finding a more resistant and long-lasting alternative is an urgent need. After all, imagine the economic and environmental impact if we could build buildings, bridges, and roads that lasted for centuries without needing constant repairs. Another curious fact is that the Romans adapted their formula as needed. For seaside constructions, they used different proportions of the ingredients to ensure even more resistance against salt water. This shows how much they understood of the science behind the materials they used, even without the laboratory analysis technology we have today. Now the big question, if the Romans achieved this millennia ago, why do we still use materials that barely last a century? Will we ever be able to match the genius of Roman concrete? Is modern engineering getting closer and closer to recovering this lost formula? Or does the solution already exist and has not yet been applied on a large scale? What do you think? Tell me here in the comments which you think was the greatest invention of the Romans. Have you ever stopped to think about what life would be like without running water? Having to carry buckets every day to shower, cook, or simply wash your hands? Well, it was exactly this problem that the Romans solved more than 2,000 years ago with one of the most brilliant inventions in history, the aqueducts. Before them, getting water was a tiring and impractical job. It was necessary to search in rivers, lakes, or wells, which made life in the cities a challenge. But the Romans had a genius idea, building huge canals that transported water from natural sources straight to urban centers. The most impressive, they did all this without pumps or modern machines, just using gravity and an accurate calculation of tilt to keep the flow constant. These aqueducts were not only efficient, they were gigantic and impressive. Many traversed valleys and mountains, supported by massive arches that still stand today. The aqueduct of Segovia in Spain is an example of this. Even after 2,000 years, it remains firm and serves as proof of the intelligence and skill of Roman engineers. Other famous aqueducts, such as those in Rome, Nimes, and Pont du Gard, also impressed with their resistance and sophistication. With this revolutionary system, the Romans brought water to public baths, houses, fountains, and even to clean the streets. This made their cities much more hygienic than any other civilization at the time. And it doesn't stop there. They also created sewage systems that carried waste out of cities, something that only became common again many centuries later. This advanced sanitation helped prevent diseases and improve the quality of life of the entire population. The impact of this invention was so great that we still use the same principles to supply our cities. The system of water collection, treatment, and distribution that we have today follows exactly the ideas that the Romans developed. Without aqueducts, urban life as we know it simply wouldn't exist. Modern technology may have evolved, but the basis of water supply remains the same. The Romans were so meticulous that they adapted the aqueducts according to the terrain. In some cases, they built underground canals to prevent waste or evaporation of water. In others, they used siphons to transport water through deep valleys using lead or ceramic pipes. All this without digital calculations or sophisticated equipment, just with practical knowledge and precise engineering. And it wasn't just the cities that benefited. Efficient water supply also impacted agriculture. With irrigation systems based on the aqueducts, the Romans ensured more productive harvests and a steady supply of food. This planning helped keep the cities supplied and the population healthy, an essential factor for the longevity of the empire. Now imagine the chaos of a world without running water. Huge queues in rivers, filthy cities, and an absurd increase in diseases. This is what happened before the Roman aqueducts. Not only did they change history, but they also created a model that still influences our modern life. Today, even large metropolises depend on systems that follow the same principles developed millennia ago. If the Romans were able to build such efficient aqueducts with the resources of the time, what else could we achieve if we invested more in water technology and sustainability? After all, even centuries later, we still face problems of access to drinking water in many parts of the world. What can we learn from the past to improve the future? And could it be that, with so much technology available, are we really making the most of the knowledge left by this civilization? And don't forget to pick up your digital book 10 Battles That Shaped the Roman Empire. It's important that you get it right now before the units run out. Have you ever noticed how many modern bridges and viaducts have arches? This is no coincidence. The Romans found that this shape distributed weight better, making buildings incredibly strong. Before them, bridges were fragile and didn't last long, but with the use of arches and Roman concrete, they created structures that are still standing after more than 2,000 years. The secret of the bow lies in the way it spreads force. Unlike a straight structure, which concentrates all the weight on fixed points, the arch transfers this load along its curve and directs it to the support pillars. This makes the buildings withstand great pressures without collapsing. This is how the Romans built aqueducts, viaducts, and bridges that defied time and withstood earthquakes and floods. But the Romans did not stop there. They applied this technique to buildings, stadiums, and even arenas. The Colosseum, for example, uses arches to support its colossal weight and allow people to move freely between floors. The same idea was used in temples and public baths, creating wide spaces without the need for central columns that would hinder circulation. And what made these constructions even more impressive? Roman concrete. They developed a special mixture of volcanic ash, lime, and pumice, which grew stronger as time went on. While many modern buildings need constant renovations, some Roman bridges remain firm and are still in use today. The Romans also developed a technique for building bridges that spanned large rivers and valleys. To do this, they used temporary wooden structures to support the stone blocks until the arch was complete. When finished, the weight was distributed so efficiently that the structure became practically indestructible. This method was essential to the expansion of the empire, allowing armies, merchants, and citizens to cross previously impassable terrain. The influence of this engineering did not stop at ancient Rome. The concept of the arch has been incorporated into modern architecture and is present in skyscrapers, viaducts, stadiums, and even tunnels. If you look around you, you'll realize that much of what we use today follows the logic that the Romans developed millennia ago. In addition, the arch technique has been improved to allow for increasingly daring and innovative constructions, proving that this ancient knowledge is still essential. Another interesting fact is that some Roman bridges have not needed significant restoration to the present day. Structures such as the Alcantara Bridge in Spain and the Fabricius Bridge in Rome are still in use. This is a definitive testament to the genius of these engineers who created something so well planned that it survived centuries of bad weather and historical change. And it wasn't just bridges and buildings that benefited from the use of arches. Underground tunnels, aqueducts, and even some types of dams were designed following this concept. Roman engineering was so advanced that it inspired construction techniques for various areas of infrastructure. If we think about it, many of the great advances in civil engineering have roots in ancient Rome. The study of weight distribution, the use of innovative materials, and the construction of structures to withstand time are concepts that continue to evolve over the centuries. But the basic principle of the bow, this genius of the Romans, remains essential in any great work. So the next time you walk over a bridge or into a large stadium, remember, without the genius of the Romans, these structures might not even exist. Not only did they build enduring monuments, but they created an engineering model that still defines the world we live in. If with the resources of that time they were capable of such precision, imagine what we can still learn and improve using the knowledge we inherited from them. Perhaps in the future, we can create even more durable structures, inspired by the same principles that were discovered thousands of years ago. Do you think underfloor heating is a modern technology? Well, know that the Romans had been using this system for more than 2,000 years. They created an ingenious method called hypocaust, which allowed them to heat entire rooms without the need for fireplaces by spreading smoke and soot around the house. This not only made the spaces more comfortable, but also showed how much they were ahead of their time. The operation was brilliant. They built the floor on small brick columns, creating an empty space underneath. Outside the building, a furnace was lit, and the hot air rose and circulated through this space, heating the floor and making the environment more pleasant on cold days. In addition, some buildings included hot air channels inside the walls, ensuring that the heat spread evenly. This system was not a luxury restricted to palaces. Public baths, such as the imposing baths of Caracalla, used hypocausts to keep the water warm and the rooms warm. The richest also incorporated this system into their homes, taking advantage of thermal comfort without the need for open flames inside the rooms. The genius of this system went beyond comfort. Because the fire was outside the building, the risk of fires was reduced, making the houses much safer. In addition, the hypocaust prevented the accumulation of smoke within the environments, improving air quality and preventing respiratory problems. But then, why did this technology disappear? With the fall of the Roman Empire, many advances were forgotten, and heating began to depend on fireplaces, which wasted much of the heat and did not offer the same thermal comfort. It took centuries before anyone thought about heating floors intelligently again. Over time, some civilizations have tried to recreate similar systems, but without the same refinement as the Romans. Only in the last few centuries has the idea of heating the floor begun to be reused, first with rudimentary systems, and more recently with advanced technologies that use electric resistances and hot water pipes embedded in the floor. Today, modern underfloor heating systems follow the same logic as the Romans. Instead of furnaces and hot air, we use pipes with heated water or electric heaters installed under the floor to spread the heat evenly. The advantage? More efficiency and lower energy consumption than traditional methods. Many high-end homes, hotels, and even hospitals have adopted this technology to offer more thermal comfort without wasting energy. In addition, underfloor heating has become an ally of sustainability. With a more efficient use of energy, it reduces the need for conventional heaters and lowers carbon emissions. Countries with harsh winters, such as Norway and Canada, invest heavily in this system to provide more comfort without raising electricity costs. It's amazing to think that an idea created thousands of years ago has returned to trend in sustainable architecture in the 21st century. The Romans already knew how to make their environments more comfortable, and we just improved the concept. Who knew that something so old would still make so much sense today? If the Romans had access to today's technologies, what else would they have invented? Can you imagine living in a city without sewage? Before the Romans, this was the daily life of practically all civilizations. Waste was dumped into the streets, drinking water was contaminated, and diseases spread unchecked. But then the Romans stepped in and changed everything with a system that still influences modern cities today. Their great idea was to create underground sewers to take the waste away from urban centers. The greatest example of this is the Cloaca Maxima, a gigantic system built more than 2,000 years ago that, believe me, still works. Not only did they dig canals, but they designed tunnels lined with stones and special mortar to prevent seepage and clogging, ensuring a steady flow of water and waste. But the Romans did not stop there. In addition to removing sewage, they have created an amazing system for distributing clean water. Public fountains, thermal baths, and even the homes of wealthier families had access to a steady stream of drinking water. The streets were planned with a slight slope so that rainwater would help clean the city, preventing the accumulation of dirt and unpleasant odors. Thanks to this infrastructure, Rome became one of the cleanest and most organized cities in the ancient world. While other civilizations suffered from epidemics and poor sanitary conditions, the Romans managed to create a healthier environment, which directly contributed to the longevity of the empire. In addition, the Romans developed public toilets, known as latrines, where water ran continuously, carrying waste directly into the underground sewers. These latrines were used by many people throughout the day, preventing waste from accumulating in the streets and providing a level of hygiene that no other civilization of the time possessed. Another interesting factor is that the Romans were already aware of the importance of maintenance. They made frequent inspections of the sewage channels and used tools to remove accumulated sediments, avoiding clogs that could compromise the entire system. This shows that his concern with sanitation was not only structural but also operational. With the fall of Rome, this knowledge was lost. For centuries, cities have reverted to being dirty and unhealthy, leading to disease outbreaks that could have been prevented. The Middle Ages was a particularly problematic period in this regard, with cities littered with garbage and open sewage. It was only in the last few centuries that the principles of Roman sanitation were readopted, serving as the basis for the modern systems we use today. Currently, any large city depends on well-structured sewage networks to avoid contamination and maintain quality of life. But the truth is that all this started with the Romans. They pioneered the idea that clean cities were essential for the health and well-being of the population. Today, sewage systems have evolved, but the basis remains the same: transporting waste efficiently to preserve public health. Today, many modern cities still face challenges with sanitation, especially in poorer regions where infrastructure has not kept pace with population growth. Perhaps, if we had applied Roman knowledge without interruption, these problems would have been solved centuries ago. So the next time you turn on a faucet or use a public bathroom, remember, this comfort would not exist if 2,000 years ago, the Romans had not decided that urban hygiene was fundamental. They changed the world, and without them, we might still be living in chaotic, filthy cities. What else can we learn from the Romans to further improve our cities? Have you noticed that Roman numerals are everywhere? You see them on clocks, movie titles, book chapters, and even the Super Bowl. They may seem like a thing of the past, but the truth is that they are still part of our daily lives. And all this thanks to a system created more than 2,000 years ago by the Romans. The Romans needed an efficient way to record taxes, transactions, and military organization. Since they did not yet use zero, they created a numerical system based on letters: I for 1, V for 5, X for 10, L for 50, C for 100, D for 500, and M for 1,000. With the combination of these symbols, they could represent any number needed to run a gigantic empire. Even today, this system is still present. When you see a movie like Rocky III or follow Super Bowl LVIII, you're using Roman numerals without realizing it. Kings and popes are also numbered in this way, such as Louis XIV or John Paul II. But after all, why is this system still used? First, because it has become a tradition. It brings an air of importance and solemnity, being widely used in historical and cultural events. In addition, its structure based on addition and subtraction is quite intuitive. When a smaller number comes before a larger one, it is subtracted, IV, ranks of 4, and when it comes after, it is added, Vice, chapter 6. In addition to tradition, Roman numerals were also used in architecture and engineering. Many buildings from ancient Rome bore inscriptions with dates and identifications using this numbering, and some monuments preserve these marks to this day. The Colosseum itself, one of the wonders of the ancient world, has Roman numeral records on its structures. Another interesting detail is that Roman numerals were widely used in ancient clocks, especially those of towers and palaces, as their shape gave a more imposing air to the buildings. Many of these pieces can still be seen in churches and squares around the world, proving that the Roman system has not gone out of style. Even in the digital age, Roman numerals continue to appear at award shows and important events. The Oscars, for example, always include Roman numerals in editions of the event. Have you noticed this in the movie credits? Often the date of production appears in this format, reinforcing the idea that the Romans left a legacy that has not been forgotten. Although it is no longer used for everyday calculations, Roman numerals continue to be present in several areas. They prove that even after 2,000 years, the influence of the Roman Empire is still alive and present in the modern world. The next time you look at a wall clock, flip through a book or attend an event with this numbering, remember, this is another heritage from the Romans that has stood the test of time and is still part of our lives. Incredible, right? We live surrounded by Roman inventions without even realizing it. They were true masters of engineering and changed the world in a way that still impacts our lives. The roads we use today follow the same principles as Roman roads, which were designed to be durable and efficient. The concrete they created is so strong that many buildings of the time are still standing, while modern buildings need constant renovations. The system of aqueducts that brought water to Roman cities was the starting point for the drinking water supply we have today. The bridges and arches used by the Romans allowed for stronger and more efficient constructions, a technique that remains essential in modern engineering. The heated floor, which many people think is a recent invention, was already used 2,000 years ago in public baths and luxurious houses of ancient Rome. Basic sanitation also has Roman roots. They were the ones who created the first underground sewer systems to keep cities clean and prevent disease, something that many regions of the world still struggle to improve. And even Roman numerals, which seem to be a thing of the past, remain firmly on clocks, monuments, and important events. And remember, whenever you want to know how Rome became the largest empire in antiquity, just go to the pinned comment and get your digital book, The 10 Battles That Shaped the Roman Empire. Get it right now because the units are limited. The Romans not only built an empire, but left a legacy that spans the centuries and is still part of our routine. Without these innovations, the modern world would be completely different. If you like this video and want more content like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. And of course, leave the like to help this knowledge reach more people. See you in the next video.